This is the times we're living in. We're living in the supernatural dispensation. And don't limit Yahweh. Don't limit him by what your mind can figure out, or what you think can turn out, or what you think will happen, or how you think it will go. Don't limit him. He's the God who parts the seas. Remember, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. He's not limited by our finite mind and finite understanding, but it's time to align ourselves with him. Well, thank you for those of you who are joining us today on Facebook, from wherever you're watching around the world, on YouTube, and on FATV when it goes on FATV. But we're glad you took the time out of your Sabbath to join us. Encourage you to come and visit us sometime on a Sabbath. We're going to start out this morning with an update from Eric Stackelbeck. And if we have that pulled up. Okay, so we're all set. So we're going to show an update from Eric Stackelbeck, and then we will jump into the message.
Hey folks, Eric Stackelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. And picture this scenario: a nuclear arms race in the world's most volatile and chaotic region, the Middle East. Could you imagine not only the Iranian regime, the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, getting the bomb, getting the world's deadliest weapons, but then Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, and others all start jockeying to acquire the bomb. A nuclear arms race in the heartland, the hotbed of radical Islam, the Middle East. That's what would happen. That's exactly what would happen if Iran acquires the bomb. Not only that, the Iranian regime would use the bomb, wield it as a nuclear umbrella of sorts for its proxies, or what's left of them, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, that ring of fire that is so badly beaten down right now and licking its wounds. All of a sudden, they could revive with a nuclear Iran behind them. Not only that, hey, I'm sitting in America right now, and I believe the Ayatollahs would use the bomb. They're not just going to sit on it. They eventually would use it because their ideology demands it, not only against Israel, the nation they call the little Satan, but I mentioned I'm sitting in America, the great Satan, in the words of the Ayatollahs. There's a reason that the Iranian regime right now is working on developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. Those missiles are not for Israel, not even for Europe. They're designed to travel across continents, travel across oceans. Those missiles are for the United States. And guess what? You develop ICBMs for one reason and one reason only, folks: to mount them with a nuclear warhead. All of the above are just a few reasons why the Iranian regime can never have the bomb. And yet we've got a growing chorus of voices, including right here in America, that are saying, no, let them get the bomb, no war with Iran. Look, no one's calling for war with Iran. What we are saying is a nuclear Iran is intolerable, number one. And number two, if you're going to do something militarily, this seems like the perfect time to do it after Iran, as I mentioned a minute ago, has seen its ring of fire pulverized by Israel over the past year and a half. Israel also destroyed a good chunk of Iran's air defenses back in October. Lay it all out, folks. And Israel and the U.S., if they so choose, have a clear path to striking those Iranian nuclear facilities. And yet, the pushback. Trump administration right now, there's internal debates over the Iran issue. The Trump administration holding nuclear talks with the Iranian regime. So what comes next and what should be done? The one and only Mark Levin, they call him the Great One, host of Life, Liberty, and Levin on Fox News every Saturday and Sunday night. Also, the Mark Levin Show, nationally syndicated talk radio show every weekday. Levin TV as well on The Blaze. Best-selling author many times over. Mark joined me today on my nightly TBN show, Stackelbeck Tonight, and he broke down not only the Iran nuclear threat, what needs to be done, but also Hamas, China, and the radical jihadists on American soil, and their alliance with the left, the radical left, an unholy alliance with rogue runaway judges having their backs. It's madness, but Mark cuts through the clutter and breaks it down like only he can. Take a look. Mark, you've been talking a lot on X recently, and for good reason, about the Iranian nuclear threat, in particular the nuclear talks ongoing now between the Trump administration and the Iranian regime, and this growing, I guess you would say, Mark, an isolationist wing that's pretty much saying, look, let Iran get the bomb, no war in Iran. By the way, no one is suggesting a war in Iran, but some of us are saying this may be a good time for surgical strikes against that Iran nuclear program. For every American, Mark, why is the Iranian nuclear program not just a threat for Israel or for the region, but for the United States as well?
You know, Eric, we were hit on 9/11. Who hit us? The Islamo-terrorists, the Nazis. Modern-day Nazis hit us. It's the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Dachau, Auschwitz. My wife and her mother right now are in Poland as we speak, at Auschwitz. And I want people to think about the modern-day Nazis and what they would do with an atomic weapon, or what they would do with a biological or chemical weapon. What happened on 9/11? If they had had access to an atomic warhead or something worse, they would have used it, and they would have blown New York City off the face of the earth. That's how serious this is. They're trying to build, and they are building, intercontinental ballistic missiles. The title should tell people what that means. That's not intended for the region. That's intended for us, to cross our ocean and to hit our cities. We do not have an Iron Dome like the Israelis. We have no way to defend ourselves if they were to shoot more than one missile over here. And if you can build one missile, you can build 100 missiles. If you can build 100 missiles, you can build 1,000 missiles. And even more than that, they can give this technology to other terrorist regimes. They can give it to terrorist groups. And so this will become utterly and completely unmanageable. Yeah. And I cannot understand and I cannot imagine us allowing this regime that is funding all the terrorism in the Middle East, that it's funding, at least in part, the anti-Semitism in our own country, that has vowed over and over again, death to America from its highest level to its phony parliament, to its streets. Why don't we believe what they're saying? We see what they're doing. They are cheating. They are lying on every deal they've ever made. They're terrorists. You can sign as many deals as you want with it. Look at this. We have a deal. Peace in our time. No, we don't. That man right there is an evil barbarian. He's a throwback. He's a primitive. And they believe the next life is the better life. And they believe their ideology, it's not Marxist and fascist, which is worse enough, bad enough. They don't believe in mutual assured destruction. They just believe in destruction. This is a death cult. That's their ideology, and they tell you about it. So the idea that they would get a nuclear weapon, and we have people in this country who claim to be conservatives or Republicans, who say that their foreign policy is a realist foreign policy, that they're tired of forever wars. So am I. So is everybody. Your complaint is with past administrations, past establishments, staff, past ruling class. But your complaint shouldn't be that we're staring evil in the eye, a terrorist regime in the eye, that is an eyelash away from having a nuclear weapon, and therefore you're worried about forever wars. Yeah. A nuclear weapon isn't a forever war. When the Enola Gay dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, it took 45 seconds to blow that city off the face of the earth, and 60,000 people with it. And we should have done what we needed to do to end that war, given the Battle of Okinawa and how many casualties we had. Yeah. That's not my point. My point is, can you imagine a death cult, a terrorist regime that says death to America with these kinds of weapons? I cannot. So the isolationists, the pacifists, the appeasers, the world has dealt with them before just because they're so-called self-identified influencers, bloggers, podcasters. They don't mean a thing to me. The fact is reality. We, this generation, is being told by a death cult that they want to eliminate the United States, that they're within effectively weeks of having nuclear weapons, and for our generation to impose on our children and grandchildren and generations yet born this kind of a threat is a sin. There is no way we can tolerate this.
No doubt. And the Iranian regime refers to Israel as the little Satan. Mark, as you said, America is the great Satan and the ultimate prize for them. About a minute left, Mark, before the break, then we will bring you right back. Pretty strong leadership, of course, in President Trump, Bibi Netanyahu right now. Are you confident they'll do the right thing going forward, regardless of the outside noise?
I am confident, but if I'm wrong, the Israelis will have to go alone, because the Israelis cannot tolerate a nuclear Iran. They just cannot. If they have to go alone, they will go alone. But I am very confident in Donald Trump. I first met him in 2015 at a Tea Party rally on Capitol Hill, and that rally was against the Iranians and the Iranian weapons, and he attended it as a private citizen, in 2015, and I met him there, and he told that crowd, no nukes for Iran. He has said it ever since.
Yeah.
I believe him. He's a well, he's a wonderful man, and he's a man who believes in his promises, and I believe that this is one that he's going to keep for sure, 100%.
I buried the lead. Congratulations are in order. You were just appointed to President Trump's Homeland Security Advisory Council. Tell us more about that role, Mark, number one. And number two, I would think perhaps some of that relates to fighting back against the madness, the anti-Semitism that's reared its head in America's streets and on its college campuses.
Well, Eric, it's an independent council. There'll be several of us on this council. The president has blown out all the left-wing kooks off this council that Biden had put on there, and he has asked us to help contribute to setting advice and policy with the Secretary, Kristi Noem, who's fantastic, and him, on securing the border. And that department takes on a lot of responsibilities, from the Secret Service to TSA to immigration and to 100 other things. And so I'm assuming it was my background as Chief of Staff to Attorney General Meese and my hard line on most of these issues. And when the president asks you to do something, you do it. And this president, it is an enormous honor for me to have been chosen. And I didn't lobby for it. I didn't even know it existed, to be perfectly honest with you. But when he asked me, I thought it was a wonderful thing. And we will do everything humanly possible to protect this country.
Yeah, you're the right man for the job, Mark, no doubt. And part of that look is this rise in anti-Semitism. And Mark, we've seen it since October 7th. You would think after October 7th, people would get behind Israel and the Jewish people after the atrocity of October 7th. Yet in many cases, we've seen the opposite, in particular on American college campuses. President Trump now pulling funding for the likes of Harvard. What more can be done, Mark, to get these universities, get these colleges in line and put an end to this evil nonsense?
President has been nothing short of fabulous in this regard. He has a special unit set up in the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, a special unit set up at the Department of Education and their civil rights activities there. They're all coordinating with DHS. The Attorney General is involved. The Secretary of DHS is involved. The Secretary of Education is involved. He's looking at everything. He is defunding these colleges of federal grants and federal monies. He is looking at the tax status, because they have these multi-billion-dollar endowments that are tax-free and they keep earning interest. And he said there's no reason to give tax-exempt status to these colleges and universities, particularly the Ivy Leagues, but not exclusively, that are doing little and certainly not enough to fight anti-Semitism in their faculty, in their administration, and among their student body. Not enough to protect the Jewish students there, and that they have a right to be protected, not just under the Civil Rights Act, but they have a right to be protected as human beings. And this sort of activity that's going on in these college campuses is funded in part by Qatar, yes, Communist China, Iran, Hamas, and they're looking at those funding streams as well. And so this is very, very important what they're doing. Again, they're facing in some cases these federal judges, like the case of Khalil and so forth.
Yeah.
These are not First Amendment issues. We're not talking about Rosa Parks here. We're not talking about anything of the kind. These are people who are vile, who are violent. If they're not personally violent, they're pushing these riotous protests. Yeah. They're coordinating with foreign governments. They're coordinating with outside groups that have terrorist links, if not terrorist per se. And they are going to overthrow this country if we don't put an end to it, because there was a great report put out recently that talked about the fact that typically these organizations are spending as much time talking about overthrowing the quote-unquote American empire, yeah, and attacking the police, like the NYPD and other cops, as they are talking about Israel. Yeah. And they're really not even talking about Israel. They're promoting Hamas. So this is an enemy within. They're well-funded. They are using our Constitution against our Constitution. These radical left-wing judges are hurting us. And what you're seeing on these campuses, Eric, is really a fusion between the Marxist faculty and so forth, and the Islamists. Yeah. And that's what's happening on these campuses right now. I think the administration is doing a tremendous amount to deal with this.
Yeah, it's really an unholy alliance, Mark. As you said, radical left, radical Islamist. And President Trump essentially he's not just defending America, Mark. He's a defender of Judeo-Christian Western civilization. Along those lines, last question, about a minute left, Mark. You mentioned communist China. We've got a so-called trade war right now. The left-wing media is in a tizzy over it. You feel good going forward about the stance, the strong stance President Trump has taken against the Chinese communists?
The Chinese communists are our enemy. They're building a military one day to try and choke us off economically, navigable waters, air power. They're working with the Russians on military bases in the Arctic Circle. And they're working on weapons, hypersonic missiles and other types of weapons, nuclear submarines. They have, for a while, controlled both sides of the Panama Canal. They have bases in West Africa to aim at our coast, also in the middle of the Pacific. So they're an enemy. They're making it clear they're an enemy. This battle, economic battle, was just a matter of time. And I think what the president is doing is dealing with it right now, and nation and worldwide. I think he is a free market, open market president who's saying, we're putting these tariffs in place. Now let's negotiate. We'll lower ours. You'll lower yours. So we have access to all our markets. We have access to all of your markets. And I think in the end, believe it or not, Eric, he's going to be closer to Milton Friedman than any president in modern American history.
Yeah, Mark, well said. And at the end of the day, these seem like just common sense policies, but it takes Donald Trump, a man like him, to come in and push him through. Mark, great job as always, my friend. Folks, check him out, Levin TV, The Mark Levin Show, Life, Liberty, and Levin. And, of course, all of his best-selling books. And on X, the great one, Mark Levin. Mark, always great to see you, my friend. God bless, Mark. Keep up the great work. Great stuff, as always, by the one and only Mark Levin. Folks, of course, every weekday, The Mark Levin Show, nationally syndicated radio show, talk radio show, and then every Saturday and Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, on Fox News, Life, Liberty, and Levin. And check him out, Amazon.com, author of many great bestsellers. Always great to have Mark. And I interviewed him. You can watch the full interview, by the way, tonight on Stacklebeck Tonight. You can catch it on TBN at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, re-air at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, or you can check it out on the Stacklebeck Tonight YouTube channel. That's right. We've got this channel. We've got another channel as well featuring clips from my nightly TBN show, Stacklebeck Tonight. You can check that out, subscribe there as well. And look, follow me, folks, Facebook, X, Instagram. We're all over the place bringing you on the ground, in-depth, cutting-edge analysis from an unapologetically biblical perspective for such a time as this. Thanks again to Mark Levin. Thanks again to you for joining us. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hallelujah. Yes, it's very interesting, all the stuff that's going on. It's, I don't know who would want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Like, it makes absolutely no logical sense. But then again, common sense is not so common anymore. It seems to be lacking in this time. But we're going to be putting our faith and believing that the right decision is made in these cases, that they will not be able to acquire that, because it would not be good for the world, really. So
now's the time. So with that being said, we're in the midst of a transition, and we just came out of Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it's a large portal. We're in between Passover and Shavuot in this whole time period. And just like the Israelites, how they embarked on a journey out of Israel, out of Egypt, heading towards the Promised Land, we're on that same journey. And like I said, it's a time of transition. So we're coming into the month of IR, Monday night, I believe it is, Monday night and Tuesday, the month of IR. And just to give a little bit about what that month is, and that's going to lead us into what we're going to be talking about today. Because what we're going to be talking about today, what we always talk about, but I think the last few months has been significant, has been a high degree of importance on the sermons that have been coming forth these last Sabbaths. Because we're in serious times. We're in serious times, and we got to get it. We got to get it. We got to get it. We got to step up. We've got to operate in knowing who we are and whose we are. We've heard it time and time again, year after year, from mom, from dad, and it's time to walk it. Okay, actually, it's past time. It's way past time. So that being said, coming into the month of IR, we need to not focus on just the place that it is in this time period. It's significant where it is. Month of IR is nestled between Nisan and Sivan. And even though maybe IR doesn't have as many things that took place in it, it had some stuff that took place in it, but like not monumental like Nisan had with Passover and how Sivan has with coming into Shavuot and stuff. But it's in the midst of the transition, okay? And it's in the midst of the journey. There's a reason why, like with and I believe Jordan's going to go more into this part of it, but the counting of the Omer. Okay, it's all a transition, it's all a journey, and that's significant in itself also with the counting of the Omer. And if I'm getting into any of your stuff, just stop me, but we know about that in this place, where every week has a flavor to it, but each day of that week has a distinct flavor to it, and it's all about getting ourselves right. It's all about self-reflection and getting right, because this is the time of preparation. It's the time of preparation to bring us to the day of Shavuot. But so it's a journey of faith. It's a significant spiritual journey of faith and growth. And, sometimes this month of IR gets overlooked in certain ways because it didn't have the monumental stuff that, we had before us, and that's what's coming up. But it's so significant because it's the month of transition. It's the month of healing. It's the month of preparation. But within that, not only is it the month of transition, transition is going from, transition is a period of changing from one state to another, a period of changing from one process to another. It's a bridge. It's one land to another. It's connecting. But, like when you start to go over, think of a bridge. We're traveling somewhere. We're traveling on our way to D.C., and we're crossing over, the George Washington Bridge. When you start at that bridge, okay, now that George Washington Bridge is a journey in itself, okay? But you start at that bridge, and when you start to cross over that first part of that bridge, you keep going. You're not meant to cross over and just stop and camp out there. You're on a journey, and we're going somewhere. We're going to CUFI. So you continue across that bridge, and it brings you to the other side, a different state than you just were in. Literally, maybe, right? Is that what the George Washington Bridge is? I'm not sure. But it brings you from a different piece of land across the river and through the woods, okay? It's bringing you from one place to another. That's what a transition is. But in the midst of that transition, there's also supposed to be a transformation that takes place. And, we've talked about that many times in here, just recently about transformation. The renewal of your mind. Let yourself be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And when a transformation is a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance. So in this midst of this transition, this process of going from one state to another, one condition to another, is supposed to be this dramatic transformation. Supposed to be this change in yourself as you're transitioning out of one place to another. Does that make faith? But so in the month of IR, it's the month of healing, and with IR, in that Hebrew phrase that's said to be the acronym for the Hebrew phrase Ani Hashem Rafeka, which means I am the Lord who heals you. Okay, you got to catch a hold of it. There's things that Yahweh is trying to get across to us. And if we just catch it the way he's intending for us to catch it, it will change everything. Just like how we talked last week, resurrection power in your life will change everything. What we're going to talk about today, that's meant to change everything for you. So in the month of IR, when we see I am the Lord who heals you, well, that verse appeared right after the Israelites crossed through the Red Sea. Okay, they embarked on that journey, they went through the Red Sea, and then Yahweh says, I am the Lord who heals you. The significance is that they were free, but they weren't yet whole. Okay? They were healed. We know they came out of Egypt, and there was not one lame among them. There was not one sick among them. They were healed, but we know the difference between healing and wholeness. They weren't yet whole because they were still carrying Egypt with them in the midst of this journey. But in the midst of that, with Egypt, there was freedom from Egypt, where that was physical liberation. Spiritual healing is a process. And that's what they had to get Egypt out of them. It took a process. It took a spiritual healing. It took this transition that they were on. And what?
Renewing their mind.
And renewing their mind. So, interesting. In certain times, whenever there's a major shift in life, we need to know how to respond to it properly. Whenever the enemy is trying to do something, we need to know how to respond to it properly. There's a difference between reacting and responding. And when it comes to the enemy, we don't react in faith, we respond in faith. There's a big difference. So with that whole thing, and in the season that we're in, Yahweh is saying, you know what? I am the God who heals. I am the God who restores and renews, if you will just allow me to. Okay, that's our part. Okay? And he's the God that restores and renews. He's the God that makes better than it was before. Even when we cannot see, he has already made the way. And that's why, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that's why we walk by faith and not by sight. So in the month of Iyar, it was a month during which the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness. Its manna was falling from heaven, water was springing from rocks. Miriam's well was a big symbol during this time. They were learning to trust Yahweh, not just as their liberator, right? Not just as the God who freed them, but as their provider, as their healer, as their guide, as their everything. There's one thing I started with Australia not too long ago, and it's like, and as a parent, you have to learn this because, it took maybe much, and it shouldn't have took much, but it took much of mom saying certain things to me where it's like, whoa, I'm not her source. All right, I'm not the one that can perform whatever in her life. I can come up alongside as her mother and decree and declare things and say this is what's going to be and fight the devil off of her and stuff like that. But he's her source, not me. So just like with the Israelites, where they needed to realize that he was their provider, he was their healer, he was their guide. That's what I started telling her and saying to her, it's like, you know what? I'm not your source. Yahweh's your source. He's your healer. He's your provider. He's your protector. He's your strength. He's your shalom. He is your Abba Yahweh, who can make the impossible possible in your life. That's who he is. And that's what he was trying to get across to the Israelites. The enemy would like believers to think that they are stuck in a desert. That's what he wants to do. Just get you stuck in the desert, and if he can keep you there, it's kind of like, there's no quicksand in the desert, right? But for some reason, I just thought of the example of quicksand. If he can get you walking along and you're not following after Holy Spirit, you're just doing your own thing and walking, and you step off in the wrong place, and we all know what quicksand is, you quickly start to sink and get stuck. That's not Yahweh's intention. That was not his intentions for the Israelites. So in the month of Iyar, we have got to learn to trust that he is bigger than all things. That he is the God that created all things, and he is the God that has already made the way. And what it is he's to live one day at a time. Okay, we were talking about this. Faith is just one step at a time. Each day needs to be a day of faith. It needs to be a lifestyle of faith each and every single day. Sometimes you don't look at the entire picture. Okay, you've just got to look at one step at a time. As Yahweh's leading, just step, just step, just step.
That's how you teach a child to walk. They don't learn to jump or run before they walk. And sometimes those first steps that they take, are not the prettiest steps. And they're just learning how to get control of their legs. And you see little babies learning how to walk, and they can barely keep their legs under them. But it's every time they do it, every time they practice taking that step, they get better at it. As you're guiding them, as you're teaching them how to do it, then they can learn how to run. So sometimes in the walk of faith, we want to run. I want to get there. The children of Israel on their journey to the promised land. Okay, I want to leave Egypt and be in the promised land. Okay, I want to be at Sinai. Okay, all right, it's already. But it took 3 months for them to get to Sinai. So it's like, no, they had to do step by step by step to get there. And it was a process.
So one last little thing about the month of IR, like I was saying at the beginning, how there's, IR doesn't contain any feasts in it, no like major things that stick out. But, there's not necessarily trumpets blowing or shofars blowing like we have at the Feast of Tabernacles or stuff like that, no parting of the seas and everything. But sometimes it's in the hidden days. It's in the, so to speak, ordinary moments that some of the greatest transformations take place. That when you're in the midst of that transition where the greatest transformations take place. We're in the midst of a transition where, we say every day, we are expecting our greatest blessing and miracle ever. And great grace and favor surrounds us like a shield. It's in those times of transition. It's in that time, really, it's in those times when the enemy tries to do something, when he's trying to get you to think otherwise, get you to try to think, well, all hope is lost or whatever. It's in the time of the greatest pressure is when there's the greatest breakthrough. And in that time of transition, he's already made the way. And the way is much bigger than we could ever think, dare to ask or imagine, because that's who he is. We just sang it. The God who does exceedingly abundantly above all that we think or imagine. That's who he is. So in this time of transition, this time of IR, we're on a journey. We've been on a journey we've always been on a journey, okay? But it's a walk out of Egypt heading to our promised land. And in this time of transition that we're talking about, we've talked about how important resurrection power is in our lives. We've talked about renewing of our minds and stuff. But also in the times that we're in, it's very important that we get in us what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. Very, very important. You're not going to operate in resurrection power if you're walking by sight. Okay, you're not going to walk in resurrection power if you're faithless. And that's why we have got to understand what it means to be walking by faith and not by sight. So the question really is, and this isn't just like some walk in the park or, taking a walk down the street or whatever. How's your faith walk? Or is it a sight walk? Are you walking by faith or are you walking by sight? Someone may say, I walk by faith, not by sight. But are you really? It's easy. It's easy to declare the word of Yahweh. But do you have the revelation of it, of what that means? Is that what you really believe? When all hell breaks loose, so to speak, how are you going to respond? Are you going to walk by faith or are you going to walk by sight? People get caught up in walking by sight, or they get caught up in walking by hearing. They get caught up in their walk of feelings, okay? And all those walks are detrimental to your faith, are dangerous to your faith. So we're going to talk about walking by faith and not by sight, but even more importantly, how do you walk by faith and not by sight when everything around you is screaming the opposite? Because that's how we have to know. That's how we have to know how to fight through that. Look at Moses. Moses is a good example. Moses walked by faith, okay? obviously, it's very clear that he walked by faith and not by sight because he was surrounded. He was surrounded by things that screamed the opposite. He was surrounded by people, okay, that were walking by sight, okay, who were murmuring and complaining and looking at things with their natural eyes, okay, seeing that Pharaoh's army was chasing them, okay, but Moses didn't. He walked by faith despite all the things around him screaming otherwise, despite all the circumstances that were trying to say otherwise. Moses still walked by faith and not by sight. So, let's turn to 2 Corinthians. Second Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. In the Amplified. And it says, "For we walk by faith." Now catch how the Amplified Classic says this, okay? "For we walk by faith. We regulate our lives and conduct ourselves by our conviction or belief respecting man's relationship to Yahweh and divine things, with trust and holy fervor. Thus we walk, not by sight or appearance." So we walk by faith and not by sight or appearance. To walk by faith means that we are living our lives trusting Yahweh 100% all the time, trusting in his promises, trusting what this word says, even if you don't know what the outcome, even in the natural, if you can't see the outcome. You know, the outcome for us is always victory, okay? But we have to do something to make sure that the outcome is victory, because we have a part to that. You know, faith is not just like blind optimism, I guess. You know, it's not wishful thinking. It's confidence in who Yahweh is. It's confidence in the one, like I said, who created all things. You know, even when there's circumstances or situations that look otherwise, by illustration, in the natural impossible, he's the God that makes the impossible possible. And we don't move by stuff like that. And we know, you know, Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Okay, the evidence of things not seen. Faith has got to be your foundation for everything. It's the evidence, not of what we see, but of what we believe because he said it. Because of what we know and believe because he said it. It's saying, you know what, Abba? I don't know how you're going to work this out, but I know you will. Okay? I know there's an answer. You've already got the answer. You've already made the way. In you know, when you're looking in the natural, and we know this, how sight can be very deceiving. Okay, it can be very deceiving. Things can look one way, but in actuality, they're not. Okay? You can think of a person. Okay? The devil could bring a person into someone's life, and they may look good. Okay? They may sound good. They may all these things good. Okay? But not all things are as they appear. So, yeah. So we live in a world that says, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. Okay? That's what the world says. Well, I'll believe it. You know, I'll believe it when I see it. But the life of a believer flips that. Okay, a believer says, I'll see it because I believe it. Okay, I already see the victory. I already see the promise manifested in my life. I already see that I'm 100% healed. Just because by illustration only in the natural, my body may be screaming something different, maybe trying to manifest this symptom or do this or whatever, I believe. I walk by faith and not by sight because I believe in what Yahweh has said. So you think about Peter walking on the water. As long as his eyes were on Yeshua, okay, he was walking in faith. He saw Yeshua walking on the water. Yeshua beckoned for him to come to me. And Peter stepped out of that boat and he began to walk. In that moment, Peter was walking by faith, not by sight. He wasn't acknowledging anything that was going on around him because he was so focused on Yeshua. Okay? It was when he took his focus off of Yeshua and began to see the storm around him and began to go with what he was seeing, he stopped walking. And in the stopping of the walking is what caused to begin to sink. The stopping of the walking and stopping of the focusing on Yeshua is what caused the enemy to start to be able to overcome him. So when we rely only on what we can see, no matter what it may be, you know, when a doctor comes in and with a report, a diagnosis, you know, a banker has something to say, a lawyer has something to say, an employer has something to say, whatever it may be. When that takes place, the enemy has a plot, okay? His plan is to get you, the biggest thing is to get you discouraged. His plan is to get you discouraged. His plan is to get you disoriented. His plan is to get you full of doubt, okay? His plan is for you to believe his lie. And as soon as you believe his lie, he's got you. As soon as you believe his lie, you've activated the power and it starts to manifest in your life. But when we walk by faith, we begin to see with heaven's eyes. We begin to see with supernatural sight. We begin to see how Yahweh has already seen things. You know, he already knows everything that's going to happen. It doesn't catch him by surprise. He's already been out there, okay? It's like, there was a word I had thought of earlier, but I'm not quite thinking of it right now. He's the scout. But, you know, he whatever the enemy tries to do, it does not throw him off guard. It doesn't surprise him, okay? He already knows when the enemy is going to try to do something. And he's already got the answer manifested. He's already got the promise manifested. He's already got the blessing manifested. But he's waiting on our words, most importantly, and he's waiting on our faith or our sight. Okay, which direction are we going to go? So, you know, walking by faith. You look at Abraham. Abraham walked by faith and not by sight, obviously. Okay, Abraham was an old man. His wife was an old man. Old woman. Old woman. She knew her identity. That's not the type of transition I'm talking about, okay? So, Sarah was an old woman, okay? And he, in the natural, he could see that, but he wasn't moved by what he saw in the natural. He was only moved by the eyes of faith. And he was only moved by what Yahweh had promised him. You will have a son. And you know, honestly though, I kind of think that, now I don't know this for sure, but you know, I do know how Yahweh operates. And you know, you take Abraham and Sarah, who were old, okay? They were old individuals. And in the natural, I mean, they were really old individuals, okay? And in the natural, old people that old have physical characteristics that start to change a little bit, okay? Things start to happen. I believe that Yahweh caused Abraham not to see Sarah, even in the physical stature. Exactly, she was beautiful. That's how Yahweh was keeping her. So she was beautiful.
I mean, Pharaoh wouldn't want some old lady that's drooping.
Okay, so yeah. Anyways, so in an instant like that, okay, Yahweh was doing His thing all across the boards. Right? When He said to Abraham, you know, Abraham was told, "Go to a land that I will show you," not. Okay, you know, I'm going to take you out to I don't know. I'm going to take you, right. This will give you all the facts, how good the agriculture is, the population of the people, what the what the climate and the weather is like, okay? Let me bring you over to, let's go take a drive to the coast. And so I'll show you how wonderful this coast is. This is where I'm going to bring you. I'm going to bring you to the ocean, okay? He didn't do that with Abraham. Oh, that would be nice. But he said, I'm going to show you. I will bring you to a land and I'm going to show you. That means Abraham had to start the transition from the place that he was in and trust Yahweh to just walk. Just keep on walking. Keep on walking. Noah, okay? Noah was a big one. Noah walked by faith and not by sight. Okay, he had to have. Come on. The guy built the boat in the midst of never seeing rain. Okay, never ever seeing rain, and he builds a boat. He walked by faith and not by sight. Moses, I used him as an example already, but Moses stood before Pharaoh with nothing but a staff and a word from Yahweh. That's all you need is a word from Yahweh. We talked about it a few weeks ago. One word from Yahweh can change everything instantly. That's all you need is one word.
To those who are walking by sight, those who walk by faith look absolutely insane. Like, think of it. Think of everybody who was watching Abraham leave everything he know and follow, who's God? Who's Yahweh? You're following him to a land he hasn't even told you where you're going. And you're calling yourself a father of many. He's gone crazy. Noah, you're building a boat in the middle of a desert. Like, what? There's no water out here. Like, why are you doing that? It will look crazy. And to someone who is looking in the natural at your life, you standing on the promises of God by faith is going to look insane. You got to get used to it. You got to get used to not everybody is going to understand it. They don't need to, because they're walking by sight. You're walking different. You have a different spirit, like Caleb.
So with Abraham, Noah, Moses, many others that we know of, they may not have always necessarily, like in these instances, they didn't know the how, but they knew the who. Okay, and that's all they needed. That's all they needed, is by knowing who he was. Faith moves us forward. It doesn't, journeys does not mean you go backwards. When you're on a journey, when you're on a transition from one place to another, that means you continuously are moving forward. Not looking back, just going forward and keeping your eyes focused on him who is leading, and you'll get the promise. Walking by faith is absolute trust in the one who is leading us on the journey. All right, so, some examples of that, walking by faith. I was going to say you talk back, but when I say that, you talk back to the doctor differently than what you heard him say. When the doctor says, well, the report shows that you have such and such, you talk back, like Mom has taught us, well, you know what, doctor? I have a higher report. And my report is the word of Yahweh. And his report says, I shall live and not die. His report says that I am healed by the stripes of Yeshua. Okay? His report, walking by faith, faith trumps facts. Faith is the truth. Okay? And we know that truth always trumps facts. Faith always overrides. So you know what? Walking by faith, and there's so many areas, and we have a tendency to focus on healing or finances, but your faith walk covers absolutely every aspect of life. Anything that you may face in your day, okay, faith is what takes care of it. So, you give, even when in the natural it might be tight. You still give. You give your way out of what the enemy is trying to do. That give is a seed, okay? If you have a need, you plant a seed and you water it with the word and with faith, okay? And that seed will produce a harvest. You apply for the job, even if you feel underqualified for it. Man does not say how qualified you are for something. Yahweh says how qualified you are for something. This could be a big one, but you forgive, even if in the natural it still hurts. You still forgive, okay?
Forgiveness isn't based on feelings.
Right. So faith isn't passive. It moves, it acts, it steps. One step at a time. It's trusting Yahweh's timing and his vision. Faith says, Yahweh, you see the whole picture, and I'm trusting your vision over my own. Okay? Isaiah 55:8-9 says to us that Yahweh's thoughts are higher than ours, and his ways are higher than ours. So sometimes, even when it doesn't make sense to us, it is Yahweh setting things into divine order. Okay? He's the God of divine order. He's not the God of chaos. We know the enemy is the one who does chaos. He's the God of divine order. So walking by faith, when you walk by faith, you know who you're walking with. And you got to know who you're walking with. It doesn't matter what it may look like in the natural. You just keep walking. You just keep trusting. You just keep believing, okay? You just keep swimming, okay? Just keep on swimming. Just keep on swimming, okay? You just keep on swimming. You just keep going. So all that to say, and I was saying to Jordan last night, we're a camp that has been very well trained about walking by faith and not by sight. But all that to lead to what I was saying in the beginning about how do you walk by faith and not by sight when everything around you is screaming differently? When, like I said, the doctors are saying something, or a banker is saying something, or a lawyer, or an employer, or whatever. We don't go by what we see. We never go by what we see. Everything around us, and, there could be something going on, and the devil's screaming, it's over, or there's no way out. You're alone, or you're failing, or just give up. You're wasting your time. Okay, just give up, it doesn't matter. But in those moments is when God is saying to you, walk by faith, not by sight. Okay? He's always there. We're never in something alone. He's always there. So sight will fail you. Sight will fail you every single time. If you live your life by sight, if you're faced with a situation and you're just so in the natural about it, so in feelings about it, so in sight about it, seeing about it, that will fail you every single time. That will cause your destruction in that area that the enemy is trying to attack in. Okay, because you're lining yourself up with sight, which is his weapon to use against a believer. So, in the natural, people's sight can sometimes have a tendency to be limited. Okay, sight is very limited, but he's an unlimited God. Okay, he's unlimited. And just because we don't see what he's doing does not mean that it's not taking place. Okay, he is always working behind the scenes, so to speak. So the Israelites saw the Red Sea in front of them and Pharaoh's army behind him, but by faith Moses stretched out his hand and Yahweh made a way. Okay, that was faith. Think about it, okay? A sea was parted. You're on the run, okay? You're on the run. You've got an enemy chasing after you, and you come all of a sudden what may appear in the natural to be the end of the road. Okay, we're at it's an end. There's a dead end. There's nowhere else to go. There's a sea all around in front of us. If we turn around and go back, we're going to run straight into the enemy. Okay, and in front of us is this sea. But Moses, okay, he was a part of that just like the rest of them were. And one man who stood in faith and not by sight. See, that's the difference between you could have two people in the same situation, and one's going to walk by faith and not by sight, and the other's going to cave into because they saw, and they're going to be defeated. So here it is, Moses, who sees this ocean, this sea before him, and here's that one word from Yahweh: stretch forth your hand. And what happens? The sea parts, and they cross over on dry ground. Okay, that's a miracle in itself. You know, we tend to overlook the fact that, it's a huge miracle that he parted the sea, and there was walls of water on either side of them, but the ground was dry. We overlook the fact that the ground was dry. Okay, you ever been to the ocean or a beach when the low tide has gone out, and you start to walk across it, and sometimes you sink into that mucky, muddy stuff, all right, because it's all water soaked? In the natural, that's how that sea, that floor should have been. It should have, but it wasn't. Okay? Because Yahweh does much more than our minds can think or imagine, down to the every last detail.
They walked through and their shoes didn't even get muddy.
That's right. Yeah. So when you walk by faith, so walking by faith and not by sight, you know, faith does not, if I say this correctly, faith does not deny that something is going on, okay? But you know, by illustration only, a doctor gives a report. Faith does not deny that report is there, okay? But what it does is it defies it, okay? It doesn't deny it. It denies its right to exist. That evil report from a doctor, faith denies its right to exist in your body. That evil report from the banker, faith denies the right for that lack to exist in your finances. You know, an evil report from a lawyer, faith denies the existence of what that lawyer is saying in your life, okay? It denies it, but what it does do is it defies it, okay? Faith says, you know, you don't pretend that a fire isn't hot. Faith does not deny that a fire is hot. But faith says you will walk through the fire and not even smell like smoke, okay? It will have no effect on me. You will walk through the flood and you will not even be wet. You know, think of it with, you walk through the fire and you won't even be burned. Okay? Even in the storm, you'll be anchored, okay? Think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay, they're a perfect example of walking by faith and not by sight. They stood before a fiery furnace. All saw the fiery furnace. They didn't deny that the fire was in the furnace. They didn't deny in the natural that fire could be hot. But what did they say? Their faith said, our God is able to deliver us. And even if he doesn't, we won't bow. But our God, our Yahweh, is able to deliver us. And we know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There was a fourth man in the fire. Okay? That's faith. It's defiance. It's walking by faith when sight says, sit down and give up. That's what sight does. Sight, you know, looking at something that the enemy is throwing at you, he wants you to get so focused in the natural, so focused on what you're seeing, that it takes you out of faith. It takes you out of what you know, what Yahweh has said in his word about it. You know the God that you serve. You know that he's the God that makes the impossible possible. You know that he's the God that is not limited to anything, okay? The enemy tries to throw you off of that by getting you so focused in sight. And too many people get focused with sight, and they're not walking by faith the way they're supposed to be. And like I was saying at the beginning, you know, everything around you might be screaming the opposite. Everything around you might be screaming defeat. Everything around you might be screaming this isn't going to work out. You know, this isn't blah, 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 blah. But everything around us is not what sets the final say. We serve the God who has the last move. Okay, we serve the God who is our source, not the surroundings, not the doctor, not the lawyer, not the employer, not the whatever, like I said earlier, not me as a source to my child. He's our source for all things. You know, what's maybe going on in the economy, That's not our source. Yahweh is our source. The diagnosis is not the final word. Yahweh is our final word. The opinions of others, okay, what other people might say, what other people might do, their opinions about you does not define who you are. Yahweh defines who you are. Our identity is in him, not in what somebody says. You know, Dad taught us when somebody would say to you, well, who are you? Okay, and most people's answer, who are you? What do you do? Who are you? Well, you know, I'm Sherry, I'm a banker, you know, I'm a mom. No, who are you? My identity was never in the fact that I was a banker. My identity is not in the fact that I'm a mother. My identity is in him. And who am I? Is that I am a daughter of the Most High God. I'm a daughter of the Most High God, who loved me so much that he gave his son so that I would be able to walk through life victoriously in every single area. But in order to get like that, in order to be walking by faith and not by sight, you know, Jordan had said this a few weeks ago about how, you know, faith is a muscle. You gotta work it. Just like when you're trying to build your natural muscles, it just doesn't happen by osmosis, okay? It doesn't happen by declarations. It doesn't happen by you sitting there and saying, muscle grows stronger. Although,
It can help.
okay? Although, you should speak to your body, but there's other things that you need to do in the speaking, okay? And so, you don't necessarily, you sit there and you speak opposite what the enemy is trying to tell you. The lies he's trying to tell you. So when you're working your faith muscle, like I said, just, you know, when you want to build your muscles, okay, you've got to do something to build your natural muscle. Yes, you can speak to it, say, muscle, get big, but you've got to do something. You've got to, in the natural, you've got to lift weights to be able to grow your muscle. What? You have to have resistance. You've got to do that. So you've got to do things to be able to walk by faith and not by sight. And that's why we stress so strongly in here about being in the Word constantly, how the Word has got to be our lifestyle, how we, you know, be listening to things, declarations of things, you know, decreeing and declaring things. That's how you build your faith. And so in walking by faith and not by sight, you don't walk by what's loud, you walk by what's true, okay? The devil may try to scream something loud, but you walk by what's true. You know, sight will scream things at you, but faith will tell you the true answer. You know, sight says this is impossible, but faith says with God, with Yahweh, all things are possible. Sight sees the giants. You know, look at the spies, you know, all, you know, we look like grasshoppers in their sight. Okay, they were going off of what they were seeing, okay, and we look like grasshoppers in their sight. No, you look like grasshoppers in your sight, okay? It was in your sight. Sight sees the giants, faith sees victory. Sight sees the grave, but faith sees resurrection power. Okay? Faith sees resurrection power. So we have got to walk by faith, even in the natural when things are screaming at us, even in the natural when the devil's trying to throw fear or anxiety and our bodies are reacting to things like that. You've got to walk by faith and not by sight. Faith doesn't need evidence. It needs obedience. To walk by faith and not by sight, it needs obedience. It needs to standing on this word and decreeing it and declaring it out of your mouth no matter what. No matter how your body might be yelling at you not to. You ever been in a place where something's going on and Yahweh says to you, just stand up and start praising. You have to fight your body sometimes. Sometimes your body is like, I do not want to stand up and stop praising. What do you mean stand up and stop praising? I just want to lay on the couch and wallow in my whatever, okay? You've got to make yourself do these things because that's walking by faith and not by sight. just to share a personal experience, how I kind of learned this, interestingly, going through something in my own life, and it was like a physical attack, and it was like, okay, and it was a kind of a physical attack that I quite hadn't experienced before, but to make a long story short, in the natural, my body was doing one thing, but I knew by faith Yahweh was telling me something else. And in that moment, sometimes it takes others around you to be like, listen, get up, gird up your loins, stand up and fight. Right? Because it can be kind of easy sometimes just to go with what the enemy is doing, because I don't know, for some reason it just seems like it's easy, because you're going with your feelings, okay? And it takes work, it takes effort to fight. Okay, think about it. When the armies are in a battle, okay, it's work, it's effort. It's not just they're sitting in a bed of roses and, oh, here comes somebody, ping, okay, oh, here comes another person, bing. No, they're out there fighting. They're out there having to do certain things. They're out there exerting themselves, over and over and over. And that's why faith is a fight. But faith needs to be walked in faith, not by sight. Okay, and that's to operate in resurrection power, to do all these things, you've got to be out of sight. Maybe literally sometimes you got to be out of sight, okay? Maybe there are times when you just got to take yourself out of sight and go somewhere and get yourself back where you need to be, because it's so important that you get back to where you need to be, that you step back in who you are and whose you are, so that you have the ultimate victory at all times. And so, I was saying to Jordan, we're ones that kind of like to read Rick Renner a lot and stuff like that when we come across certain things, and because it's just timely, it fits right in with the message and everything. And so today is not actually going to be Rick Renner, but and I've been doing this lately because it's just as powerful. When there's supernatural revelation in your midst, you need to grab a hold of it. You need to not just hear it. It needs to not just be taught. Like Dad said, it has to be caught. Okay, it's got to be caught, and you've got to begin to walk it out. You've got to begin to walk forth in it. So this isn't actually from Rick Renner. There's another person that we know very, very well, all close and dear to our hearts, but it's Pastor Donna Long. Okay? And in all seriousness, some of the things that she puts, I know, to all of us in texts, there's supernatural revelation in it. And it's always very timely. Have you ever noticed how timely it is? And it's like, I have said to myself before, how did she even know? How did she even know I was sitting here at this moment, fighting, okay? And it's like, and all of a sudden, boom, this thing comes, and it's like, okay. So I have added this to my list of devotions. Like Rick Renner has sparkling gems. I don't know what we can call hers, but we'll come up with something. So sparkling diamonds.
He's got the gems.
So, and that's what we've been talking about. The importance of our faith in the midst of tests and trials is vital. In all seriousness, I'm being completely serious right now. Things that she sends to you in a text, turn it into a declaration. I have been doing that with so many things that she has sent lately, especially over the last couple months. I've turned it into a personal declaration for myself, for my family, because there's so much power in it. So and this ties obviously right in with our message for today, because she's a vital part of every message on Sabbath. But it says the victory is already ours, and our faith reminds us of that truth. We know the end from the beginning. We know that the Yahweh ordained outcome is victory. But victory is not automatically manifested in this dimension. We must bring our faith to that victory. This is the victory that overcomes the attacks of the enemy, even our faith. Okay, that's what we're talking about. The victory that is already established is waiting for our faith to make the transfer from the fourth dimension into this dimension. We appropriate the victory with our faith. Our faith-filled words build the highway for that victory to transition from there to here. In the midst of attacks, when everything looks to be opposite of the truth, we work in the authority of that word, which never fails. We cannot afford to be amazed or bewildered by the fiery ordeal which is taking place to test the quality of our stand of faith. The enemy will test us to see if we really believe what we say that we believe. Are we doers of the word that we speak? Do we have faith that will not quit? Do we have faith that is quickly thrown aside by feelings about what our natural eyes are seeing? The proper mindset response in the midst of a fiery trial is rejoicing. We know that Yeshua already took care of this and the enemy is defeated. It doesn't matter if it seems that a monumental, huge giant is standing before us, it is a defeated foe. All we need to do is enforce that defeat with "it is written." We focus on the victory that is already ours, who we are and whose we are, standing our ground as the warriors of the occupying army of Yahweh, speaking the words of truth only, and we refuse to be swayed or moved off of that victory ground. We praise and rejoice our way through the good fight of faith, all the way dancing the touchdown victory dance. Amen? Amen? I feel like I'm reading faith to faith when I read these things. I really do. That really is the sermon for today, okay? That right there is the power-packed punch of what is being delivered today. So, just one more scripture in Philippians 1:28. Okay, and this is walking by faith and not by sight. Philippians 1:28. And do not for a moment be frightened or intimidated in anything by your opponents and adversaries. For such constancy and fearlessness will be a clear sign, proof and seal to them of their impending destruction, but a sure token and evidence of your deliverance and salvation, and that from Yahweh. Okay? That's the truth. That's what we keep our eyes on. In anything in life, that's the truth.
You know, she was talking about that journey from the deliverance at the Red Sea through the desert and all that. And sometimes, you know, it's the space between deliverance and destination where Yahweh has his work. And the work is not so much that he needs to do what he's planning on doing. It's he needs to get us in position to receive what he's already accomplished. Their deliverance from Egypt was already a done deal when he spoke it out. When he said the first time, "Let my people go, that they may serve me." That was his plan from the beginning. They had to be in position to be able to walk out that deliverance that he had. The Israelites had experienced that miraculous deliverance. They experienced the angel passing over their house, the angel of death passing over their house. They marched out of Egypt with gold in their bags as slaves. They marched out with gold in their bags. But then that freedom had to be walked out. They had to learn how to be free. You know, how did they learn how to do it when it wasn't that God was speaking with a booming voice from Mount Sinai or parting the sea in front of them? How was it that they learned how to walk out every step of that journey through the wilderness? That was the training ground. Like she said, it's where he was trying to get Egypt out of them. That's where he was discipling them. He was discipling them through that journey in the wilderness. And so if we look at the counting of the Omer, why is it significant that he tells us to count every day through here? You know, there's a verse, I think it's in Ecclesiastes or Lamentations. I think it's in Ecclesiastes. Teach us to number our days that you may get a heart of wisdom. And we look at that kind of sometimes, I think, in the sense of teach us to number our days. Oh, like, yeah, I only have this many days left until I die. That's not what he's saying. He's like, teach us to count our days that we make the most of every opportunity. It says that in the New Testament, that you make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. You gotta grasp every opportunity that Yahweh puts in front of you. And every test is an opportunity to show that Yahweh is who he is in your life. Everything that the enemy tries to bring up against you is an opportunity for Yahweh to show his mighty arm. And to display his might in your life. But the thing is we are living in such a microwave generation. Anybody know what that is? Like everything, we want everything fast. It's like we live in a world that doesn't like to wait. There's just something in our nature that doesn't even like to wait for a moment. We don't so much. Microwave our meals. It's actually really bad. It takes all the nutrition out of it. Anyways, but you scroll past anything that's longer than 30 seconds. You tap out if a web page is taking longer than 3 seconds to load. It's thinking, oh, forget this. I'm not going to, 2-day shipping is too long. Like now we have Amazon that's like, you can get same day shipping. Wow. How do they do that? You can get it today by 4 p.m. if you order now in the next 10 minutes, But 2-day shipping feels too long sometimes. It's like, no, I want it now. Our culture is like focused on speed, on convenience, and instant results. Okay, you don't want to have to go through all the work to be able to lose weight. Here's a pill you can take, and now it's going to be instantaneous results. And now they're starting to find out what the pills actually do to your body. Anyways, that's a whole other subject. But we want everything fast. Fast food, fast feedback. That's why in this culture, they get all their news and their information from TikTok. And it's usually these teens that are going little sound bites. And so we want our future to be fast too. And unfortunately, we tend to carry that mentality, that same urgency, that same, we got to have it like that, right now. We carry that into our faith. And faith is not like that. Faith is not a microwave. Faith is not instantaneous. It takes time. It takes a process. It takes trust in a Yahweh who's never rushed, but he's never late. He's never going to be pressured by your schedule, but he's never late. Habakkuk 2:3 talks about write the vision. The vision awaits an appointed time. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. So when Yahweh has given you a promise, when he gave the Israelites the promise of the promised land, they had a process to walk out before it came. But it was there waiting for them. It was waiting on them to be in the position. It was waiting them to be in the right place at the right time. It was waiting on their obedience. And oftentimes our vision is awaiting on the other side of our obedience. Our step-by-step, what is it that you would have me, what is this next step you would have me take? Abraham, like she was saying, go to a land I will show you. Okay, it took that next step of walking out of the land where he had been. Walking out of Ur of the Chaldees, he had to take one step at a time on his journey to the promised land. If he had stopped halfway, well, what was it? His father, Terah, stopped halfway, and he stopped with him for a while until his father died, and then he continued on the journey. So how many times do we stop along our journey to the promised land and settle? Okay, well, we're not quite where we want to be, but it's better than Egypt. It's better than where I was. So we're kind of in this halfway point. Like she said, you're never meant to be stuck in that halfway point. You're not supposed to be stuck in the desert. You're not supposed to be stuck in the quicksand. You're not supposed to be in that place forever. His plan for the Israelites was not for them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. It was supposed to be, a 40-day journey from Sinai. 11-day journey. Whatever it was not supposed to be 40 years. It was not even supposed to be it was not even supposed to be a year. But they turned something that was supposed to be faster than it was into longer than it should have taken because of their impatience. So sometimes if we're jumping ahead of what Yahweh is trying to have us, it will set us back even further. in the long run. Abraham waited 25 years for his promised son. Yeah, he jumped ahead of I do have something about that later on in my thing, that he kind of jumped ahead of Holy Spirit and ended up with Ishmael, and we're still dealing with the effects of that one. Joseph waited 13 years in prison for a dream to come true. That was partly his fault too. So you see, everybody has a part to play in this. Moses waited 40 years in the wilderness before his calling really began. That was his fault too, because he acted ahead of what Holy Spirit told him. See, there's a lesson in all these. There is a waiting period. There's a training period, but sometimes people turn it into longer than it should be. Why has this not happened yet in my life? Well, maybe sometimes we're delaying it. But then Moses ended up spending another 40 years leading people through through wandering in the wilderness because of them. He's like, all right, first it's me, now it's you, and then he ends up blaming them, and he never got it. Yeah, right. But Yahweh gave them the vision, but he didn't give them the speed. It was not like, okay, I'm calling you to lead these people out of Egypt. Now tomorrow you go and talk to Pharaoh. But my point is, it's not instantaneous. When Yahweh tells you, okay, I have a vision for you to do this, it's not necessarily going to take place tomorrow, because you have a preparation to get there. He calls, even think of Yeshua and his ministry. He didn't start in his ministry until he was 30. And all that time was a preparation for him, learning to listen to the voice of his Father, learning who he was. And if Yeshua had to go through that time of preparation, and then you think of right before he started his ministry, what did he do? He went out into the wilderness for 40 days. And that was where his time of testing to see, what are you really made of? Are you ready for this? Are you ready for the weight of this ministry you're about to carry? And Yeshua carried a weightier ministry than anyone else on this earth will ever have to carry. He was carrying literally the weight of the world on his shoulders. Everything that he did mattered. If he missed one step, we wouldn't be here today. So something like that. Even in Yeshua's life, in Yeshua's ministry, it was not a microwave result. It was not like an instantaneous thing. Microwave faith wants the promised land by lunchtime. I want it. I want now. You gave me the word. Think of it. We've all gotten words from the Lord about different things in our lives, and it's like, okay, I got the word, so tonight it's going to happen. But we are the ones who determine how quick we learn something. Think of a child in school. You got to progress through your addition tables before you can get to multiplication. Then you got to progress through multiplication before you can get to division. Then you got to learn division and all this stuff before you get to algebra. Then you got to learn algebra before you get to, it's a progressive thing. You can't take a child who's just learning how to count and say, I'm going to teach you trigonometry now. They're not going to get the concept because they don't have the foundation. Everything builds upon each other. And you can't jump steps, but you can determine how quickly you absorb the information, how quickly you learn the lessons of faith. That journey through the wilderness, those lessons, the children of Israel should have learned the lessons quicker than they did. All right? They were in Yahweh was trying to make them ready. He delivered them. He wasn't trying to get them to Sinai fast. He didn't take them a shortcut. It took them 3 months to get to Sinai. But that was the design. He was trying to make them ready. They were freed, but they were not formed. They were not formed into a place where they were ready for the covenant. He was trying to get them into this place. He was trying to change their responses and teach them to trust him. Okay, think of it like, okay, children, what do we do when this happens? That's basically what the whole story. Read it from that perspective. Okay, what do we do when there's no water? We blame Moses and run back to Egypt? No, wrong answer. Okay, what do we do when there's no food? We want to kill Moses? No, wrong answer again. They kept getting the wrong answer on the tests. Yes, they did. Every time. They were not learning their lessons. He was trying to show them a pattern. Okay, we all know about patterns, 2, 4, 6, 3, 6, 9. Okay, so we know the patterns, which I don't even know if they teach patterns now. It's like so 2 plus 2 is 5 is close enough. But think of a word problem, okay? Dad was big on word problems. I remember word problems growing up. That was the bane of my existence. But the word problems, think of it. Word problems are the only place where someone buys 15 watermelons and nobody questions them. Like, why? It's like, why are you buying 15 watermelons? This person bought 15 watermelons. This person bought 3 apples. Then how many of this is what word problems. Anyways, but you think of it, all those patterns are supposed to be showing you when you're following a pattern, you should know the next result of it. Even when you take some of these random IQ tests, some of them it's like, okay, I don't even see the pattern in it. It's like shows you like a square and a circle, and like they're interconnected, and the next one shows the square and the circle outside, and then you're supposed to know what the next picture should be. And it's like sometimes they're not as clear, but they're patterns. And so Yahweh's setting up this pattern. Okay, so we get to the Red Sea, and what's the pattern? He delivers them. Then we get to the place, and they have no food in the desert, and he provides manna for them. And then we get to the place, okay, there's no water, and he splits the rock and provides water out of the rock. So it's like this pattern. So they should be able to, 2, 4, 6, 8, they should be able to come to the next step and say, okay, there's an enemy coming against us. Okay, Yahweh is going to deliver us. Okay, this is happening. We don't have this in our lives, so he's going to provide it. That's what he was trying to show them time and time and time and time again. And they just simply were not picking up the pattern. They were stuck in their old way of thinking. They were walking by sight continuously and not by faith. And that's why they ended up, finally it was too much. And it's like, okay, you are not advancing to the next grade. You got to go back to kindergarten, And so they end up wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And that was not his intention. Had they learned these lessons, had they picked up on that pattern, had he taught them the pattern and they caught it, then they could have advanced to the next level faster. We should learn something from that. And how many times through our own lives we can point all the fingers at them and say, well, God showed them time and time again that he had their back. Why didn't they trust him? Well, why don't we? Time and time again, Yahweh has come through when it seemed like there was no way, when it seemed like it was the end, when it seemed like all hope was lost, and he's come through time after time after time. So now you're faced with a situation that looks impossible. What should be your thought? This is nothing that my God can't handle. He's the God of the impossible. He specializes in the impossible. He specializes in things that look like no man can do it. He is an expert at that. And he's going to make a way. It should just make us more confident in that. The waiting builds what speed cannot. Isaiah 40:31 says, those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Not those who rush about and are constantly busy and overthinking. We keep talking about this. And not those who demand, not those who are rushing, but those who wait. Because the waiting builds depth. Fast growth can look good. Think of the weeds that spring up fast and they grow really fast. But deep growth is what lasts. Faith with roots doesn't grow overnight. But think of it like an oak tree. An oak tree can withstand storms. It can withstand a lot more wind and stuff than other plants, but it grows slow because the roots take time. It's growing those roots deep. So the delay is not a denial. It's not that, no, your promised land is no longer there. You think, oftentimes Yahweh is preparing you to be ready for it. You think you're waiting on the promise, but the promise is waiting on you to be ready. So it's all about us getting ourselves in the right place. Maybe our faith is being stretched so it can carry something weightier later. Interesting, she was talking about lifting weights. And I was thinking of that because like an exercise program. you have particular weightlifting programs. You don't start by bench pressing 100 pounds. That's a good way to get hurt because you're not ready for it. You're not ready for that weight yet. There's too many people sometimes that jump out ahead of where Yahweh has them, and they're not ready to carry that weight yet. We've seen it in ministry. We've seen it with people who, I'm called to be a prophet, and go running out, and they get hit with something that they were never meant to be attacked with because they were in a place where they weren't ready to handle the pressure coming up against them. But you can't just go out and expect to just start bench pressing 100 pounds. You start with little weights. And a lot of times people, they don't want to start with a little weight. Like 2 pounds, what is that going to do? I want to start with a heavier weight. But you know what? It's not in just like, okay, I'm going to go and start lifting 20 pounds this day, and then for the next 5 days, I can't pick up anything because I'm so tired. And you start slow, but it gradually builds up upon each other. And then suddenly you find yourself, and some of these weightlifting programs have like these goals of how much weight you lift in a day, and it's the same exercises every day, but sometimes they start doing more repetitions of it, and then they start adding more weight to it and all that, and suddenly you find out, I lifted 10,000 pounds today total, like not like 10,000 pounds, but how much pounds did you end up lifting this way? I don't know if there's anybody who can lift 10,000 pounds, but anyways, but I think of a lot of things obviously in the sense of hiking, but when you're going out and you have planned a big hike, you got to build up to it. You can't just get off the couch after not moving for 5 months and say, I'm going to go and hike a multi-day hike. There are some people who do that. No, it's not recommended, and usually they're suffering for it afterwards. But it was a few years ago, I decided I wanted to do a bigger hike, like up in the White Mountains. And so I thought, I got to start training for it. So I started preparing myself, and I realized I'm going to have to be carrying more weight than usual because I need more supplies, more water, and stuff like that. So I was like, all right. So I started out on Mount Watatic. It's a little mountain around here. It takes like half an hour to get to the top. Seems like nothing. You start climbing up that mountain, especially if you're carrying a backpack that weighs more than what you're used to carrying, you find out, okay, this is tough. It's tough on the legs. It's tough on your shoulders. It's tough on everything. And so the first time I did that, I thought, there's no way I'm going to be doing this bigger hike up in the White Mountains. There's no way. Like I am not in condition for that. I'm like, there's just no way. But when you start building yourself up and you say, okay, I did that one hike. It was tough. All right, fine. Next time it's a little easier. Not like okay, next time I'm Superman, but you're a little stronger the next time. And then you start going more often, and you find yourself, okay, this is getting easier and easier every time I do it because my body is being conditioned to it. You're being prepared. You're being trained. And then you start adding more weight to your pack, and then you start extending the thing. And okay, so now I'm going to hike Mount Watatic twice in the day. Now I'm going to move on to Mount Monadnock, which is a little bit bigger. And then slowly over time, what I started finding, while it was tough at first, all of a sudden something shifted. And my body adapted. The pack didn't get lighter, but I got stronger. The mountain didn't get shorter. The mountain did not change in its height or its steepness, but I had more stamina because I had been putting the pressure on myself in that. The journey through the wilderness is meant to put the pressure on to teach them to carry the freedom. Freedom can be a heavy thing. When you've been a slave for that long, freedom can be a heavy thing because suddenly now you're responsible for carrying responsibility, for carrying identity, for carrying trust, for carrying these things that you never were responsible for when you were a slave. They were going to become a nation. That's a weighty thing. They were going to be now carrying the covenant. That's a very heavy thing. And so they were heading for that place, and they had to be trained. Did they drop the pack a few times? Yeah. Did they complain? Did they moan and groan and gripe? Yes, they did. But Yahweh walked with them by their side. He never gave up on them. He was with them all through that journey. He trained them, and he taught them how to carry the weight of being his people. You know, that microwave faith, it gives up in like 30 seconds. Okay, well, I didn't see the end result of my faith by tonight, so it must not work. You know, Brother Keith Moore talks about a time when he was believing for a car. And he had the specific car, and he had gotten revelation that you can ask for something in faith and you will get it. And so he's like, I believe I'm going to get this car by December 31st at 12 p.m. or whatever, midnight. Okay, so he sets this timeline, and he and Phyllis are on their faith, and they're confessing, they're believing and all that. And, you know, the last week of the year comes, and they're checking the mailbox. They're believing that they're going to get the money in the mail for that. And they're going to go, and December 31st comes, and they're like, this is the day. You know, something big's going to happen today. And they're checking their mailbox, and then it's not there. And then 11 o'clock p.m. comes, and they didn't get anything. And then he said, and then 12:01 hits, and all of a sudden our feathers fell, you know, and we're like, okay, well, we didn't get the result of our faith. And so he said he kind of just put it on the shelf for a while, because it's like, well, you know, God will help me understand it in time, and I don't understand. I'm just going to keep moving on. And he said one day he was in prayer, and Holy Spirit said to him, I wasn't the one that told you to put that time limit on it. You're the one who heard somebody else say, oh, you set a time limit to it, and you decided to jump in and say it. But your faith was not there yet. Your faith was not ready to have it come into manifestation within that time frame. So because of that, you decide to let go of your faith entirely? The promise is still there. He said, you mean I can still get up on that and believe for the new car? Yeah. And he did end up receiving it. Not in the time frame that he in his mind set, but when his faith was fully ready to carry it out. And so sometimes the believing is obeying when you don't see it yet. You take the next step. You take do the next right thing. Do the next thing that he tells you to do. And step by step, it becomes the promised land. And so Yahweh wasn't just trying to get them there fast. He was trying to get them ready. Sometimes the miracle isn't what's ahead of you, but what Yahweh has closed behind you. You know, the doors that he's closed behind you may be the biggest miracle in your life. Yahweh's plan in bringing them out of Egypt was not just to bring them out and deliver them. It was to bring them close, to bring them into relationship, to bring them into fellowship with him. The desert, that wilderness journey to Sinai was not a punishment for them. It was a preparation. It was more than that. It was where Yahweh dwelled. He was teaching them to be still and know that I am God. Be still. Come out of the chaos that you lived in Egypt, and be still and know that I am God. So when we're in that in-between season, when we're walking this Omer journey, when we're counting every day, make the most of it. Don't just okay, Omer day 1, day 2, day 3, you know, and just going through the motions. It's meant to be something that we do purposely. You know, count the days purposely. Don't waste it. Don't waste the time. Don't count the days in anxiety. Count them in anticipation. Okay, what is it that you're teaching me today? We've gone through that Omer journey before, where it's like, okay, what are the lessons that you have for this week? What is it, you know, maybe it might be day 1, you're facing a fear that the enemy has been trying to put in your path. Maybe day 9, you're learning to forgive. And you learn these lessons, you catch a hold of them, and there are things that it's not just, okay, I learned that back then, and now I'm going to move on to the next. No, it's building upon each other. Day 20, you deal with your pride. Day 29, you learn how Holy Spirit leads you. Day 49, you realize you're hungry for the holiness of God. And then day 50, you wake up, and you find yourself at Sinai. You find yourself at the upper room where the fire of God falls and fills you. And then you're not just free, but you're filled. You're in a different place. You're in a transformed place. You're not the slave that you used to be. And you're not where you used to be. You're in a completely different location. You know, Yeshua could have left and given the Spirit on the same day, but he didn't. He gave some time because the waiting was the preparation. He was preparing the disciples to be infilled with the Holy Spirit. And that time is when he started visiting them, not in the drama of the empty tomb and the resurrection and all that, but showing up for breakfast on the beach with them. You know, showing up in the middle of a room where he didn't walk through the door, you know, individually ministering to them to prepare them for that giving of the Holy Spirit. He was teaching them about the kingdom way. And they were obviously in a place where they were much more receptive to it than they had been before the resurrection, because they caught it. The disciples that came out of that upper room after Shavuot were a completely different band of men than they had been before. The Spirit of God filled them so much that they went forth from that place, and they did go to Jerusalem, to Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And all of us, in some way, have been touched by their preaching. You know, in some way, we have been impacted by what those original disciples did. And now it's our turn to leave those steps, leave the tracks behind us for others to follow. So this journey to Sinai, this journey between Passover and Shavuot is meant to be a time of preparation for us. So we need to make the most of it. I had one article that I wanted to read real quick. Came in my email from the Israel Bible, actually. And this rabbi was talking about the invisible hand tracing redemption's true path. And I thought it was really interesting. He said, when we imagine redemption, we picture thunderous miracles, walls of water splitting, plagues raining down, dramatic, earth-shattering events that transform reality in an instant. But what if salvation arrives not with a roar, but with a whisper? Will the final redemption mirror the Exodus with spectacular supernatural interventions that defy all logic? Or might deliverance unfold in a way we least expect? The prophet Isaiah provided a key insight. Isaiah 60, verse 22 says, "The smallest shall become a clan, the least a mighty nation. I, Hashem, will speed it in due time." The verse reveals two potential paths of redemption. Achishana, I will speed it, represents redemption that comes suddenly with open and spectacular miracles, like the Exodus from Egypt, where God intervened with tremendous supernatural displays of power. Whole nations would be overthrown in an instant, the laws of nature suspended, divine intervention manifest for all to see. But there's another path, be'itah, in due time. This is redemption that unfolds slowly, almost imperceptibly. It arrives through natural processes without dramatic miracles. No splitting seas, no pillars of fire, just the steady, patient work of transformation happening beneath the surface. In Jewish tradition, the first day of Passover marks a powerful liturgical shift. Throughout the winter months, prayers include a request for rain, powerful, dramatic precipitation that drenches the earth. But on Passover, these prayers change. Now the focus turns to dew, a subtle, gentle moisture that appears almost unnoticed. This shift is deeply symbolic. Rain crashes from the sky in powerful torrents, reshaping the landscape in moments. Dew, by contrast, appears silently. Each morning, it settles softly across the ground, barely noticed, yet entirely changing the earth. Just as dew nourishes the earth without fanfare, redemption can work quietly, consistently, changing everything without a sound. Consider the current war in Israel. Initially, we witnessed extraordinary moments, like the precise strike eliminating Hezbollah leadership, the pagers. But as time passes, we've shifted to a different mode. The urgent, explosive energy has given way to steady, persistent effort to uproot Hamas and destroy its terror tunnel infrastructure. The biblical narrative suggests divine intervention changes over time. After the first temple's destruction, miracles became less theatrical. Occasional extraordinary events like the Six-Day War, where Israel's miraculous victory defied all military logic, remind us that God's hand remains active even when less visible. The modern history of Israel reveals God working through nature and time. Over the last 100 years, we've witnessed the extraordinary rebirth of a nation. The land that lay desolate for centuries has been brought back to life. Prophecies once considered impossible have been fulfilled before our eyes. The Jewish people have been gathered from the four corners of the earth, transformed from a scattered people to a thriving nation. The prayer for dew captures this spirit of quiet transformation. Dew, precious dew, unto your land forlorn, pour out your blessing and your exaltation to strengthen us with wine and corn and give us your chosen city, safe foundation in dew. That's a Jewish prayer. When Jews returned from the Babylonian exile, they found Jerusalem in ruins. The temple lay destroyed. The city's walls were shattered stones, a testament to devastating defeat. Despair could have easily consumed them. Many likely hoped for a miraculous, instantaneous restoration, a divine intervention that would rebuild everything in a moment. But Nehemiah understood redemption differently. He taught the people that salvation doesn't always arrive like rain, sudden and overwhelming. Sometimes redemption comes like the dew, gradually and quietly. He showed them that if each person would rebuild just their small section of the wall, eventually the entire city would be restored. See, you're just responsible for the next step in front of you. What is the one thing that you can do? See, sometimes, Sherry was talking about the overthinking on Tuesday night. And sometimes we can get so overthinking because we're thinking of everything that needs to be done in the whole grand scheme of our lives. And then when you're starting to look at that, it is overwhelming because you're not supposed to think of all those things at once. Break it down into small steps. What is the one step I can take? What is the one thing I can do today? If it's like, oh, my house is overwhelming, I can't clean it all. Well, what is one room you can take? What is one corner of one room you can start with? Break it down into something that you can start with rather than looking at the big thing. If each person would rebuild just their small section of the wall, eventually the entire city would be restored. One stone at a time, one section at a time. This was not a minor accomplishment. It was a radical reimagining of redemption. Instead of waiting for a miraculous complete restoration, they would participate actively in their own salvation. And that's the point we're at here. We're participating actively in the plan, Yahweh's plan for our lives. It's not, we're just sitting back. When it says wait upon the Lord, it doesn't mean just kick up your feet and say, oh, I'm waiting for you to drop it on me. I'm waiting for you to rain down money from heaven, like she said last week. I'm participating actively in what is the next step you have for me to take? What do you want me to do, Lord? And then you act upon that. We recognize this is not passive waiting. This is active hope. We recognize that redemption arrives through persistent, faithful work, small actions, quiet dedication, the gentle accumulation of effort like dew gathering on the morning grass. Redemption is not a single moment, but a process. It demands patience, vision, and unwavering faith. We are called to be partners in this unfolding miracle, to see beyond the immediate, to trust in a larger plan. Our role is to continue building, supporting, and believing, to water the seeds of hope drop by drop until the landscape of our world is transformed. And I thought that just went right along with what we're talking about, that we're talking about walking by faith and not by sight. And it's a step-by-step process. That journey through the wilderness, however long it was supposed to take, it was still one step at a time. They couldn't skip steps. They couldn't jump ahead. It builds upon each other. So during the rest of what's remaining of the Omer, I think we're at what day are we on now? 13, 14? Going into 14? Yeah. So tonight will be 14. So what the remaining time in the counting of the Omer until we get to Shavuot, ask the Lord to show you every day, what is the lesson you have for me to learn today? What is the thing, we learn something new every day, we say. Well, let's grab a hold of those lessons and get them so deep inside of us that they are planted in our hearts. And then they can build a foundation for us moving forward. So then when we get to the point where we're standing on the cusp of our promised land, we won't be like the Israelites that weren't ready and had to turn back and wander in the wilderness for another 40 years before they could receive the blessing that Yahweh already had preordained for them. Let's actively participate in it and do what he's called us to do, step by step, obedient action by obedient action, and always walking by faith, not by sight. Amen. Do you have anything? You sure? Okay. Well, thank you for those of you who joined us today on Facebook. We trust you got something out of this message. We will see you on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Until then, you have a blessed week.